Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:06 on O'Connor and Company here in your nation's capital, the District of Columbia, where we repeat once again, now even with more emphasis after the carjacking of Representative Henry Cuellar last night, that home rule is a failed experiment, and it is time for the House of Representatives to take their constitutional role of oversight seriously and throw out this district council. Sorry, the people of the District of Columbia have proven that they are not capable of controlling crime and legislation and the operations of the nation's capital. Congress should do it. 50 years later, it's time for home rule to go to the ash bin of history. That's my position. That's your position, Julie Gunlow?
Yes.
That's our position, shall we say. I'm glad we got that off our chest. Now, coming up later in the program at 6:35, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, 7:05, Janine Eunice from A New Civil Liberties Alliance, and at 8:05, Ron Charles, Washington Post book reporter. He'll talk about his grave concerns over book banning in America. Or one could also say his interest in having pornography in front of children.
His concern with having parent involvement in what their children read.
Or his advocacy that kids read porn.
Yeah.
On the public
It's going to be an interesting interview.
dime. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, 8:05. Joining us right now is Daniel Turner, energy expert at Power the Future. He's the CEO there. Hey, Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be on with you. Thanks for having me back.
The Biden administration always says whenever gas prices climb, which they're doing once again, they always claim we're in full support of drilling in America. We haven't stopped any drilling. We haven't kept any of the oil companies from doing. They can drill all they want. And yet now we see this story that the Biden administration has actually prohibited members of the government, of the executive branch, to travel to energy conferences if those conferences promote the very activity we're talking about, drilling for oil, drilling for natural gas. If you are part of the Biden administration, you are prohibited from participating in such things. That seems kind of totalitarian.
Yeah, you're not prohibited from traveling to Iran, by the way.
Right.
You're not prohibited from traveling to Venezuela.
That's
but
right.
Yes, if there's an oil and gas conference, you are no longer allowed to attend. And look, since day one of the Biden administration, I've been saying how there is clearly a war on American energy. He's declared war on fossil fuels. And, people said, oh, you're being so hyperbolic and calm down. Well, when you prohibit someone from attending a conference like this, when you make it against the administration's policies, you're clearly saying that we're an enemy, right? You don't support us. You're not even allowed to attend your conferences.
Yeah, you're not worthy of our presence or to even be spoken to.
Exactly. And, one of the problems with this industry writ large, I shouldn't say problems, but one of the challenges is that unlike many industries, it requires an awful lot of government cooperation, right? We need access for land use, we need permitting, we need permissions for pipeline. You really can't just strike oil and gas or dig for coal without an awful lot of government help. So when government says we're not going to make it possible for you to do your job, well, this is the result. And I just have to ask the listeners, the American people, it's been 2+ years of Biden's war on energy. How are your grocery bills going, right? How's not just the gas at the car, but everything you buy is more expensive, and it still is very expensive because we've made energy expensive. So this is the future we have to look forward to, not just more carjackings in Washington, D.C., but we also have to look forward to more expensive lifestyle across America if these folks stay in power.
Well, this is all sort of a move to get the American public to have to comply. The White House says, look, I don't even let our senior members of my administration fly. Like, you should also, limit your flight miles. And some really disturbing polls are showing that people are kind of okay with that. I mean, we have seen polls of young people who are sort of okay with communism and socialism. So I'm not surprised that some recent polls have shown people are fine with lifetime limits on how many flights they take. What do you think about that?
There are, and the numbers in support of it, especially amongst young people, were shocking. It was close to 50% of young people were okay with lifetime limits. Now, it was a poll that was also conducted overseas, and I say that's great. That's why my ancestors left Europe and came to America. So if you want to ban your citizens from traveling France or Italy or Germany, you go right ahead and do that. But what I don't want is that sort of progressive communism infecting America. But sadly, it does. America is the leader of the free world. We know it. But Europe is the leader of the progressive world, and they are a good 20 years ahead of us when it comes to the green agenda. And it does trickle its way, sadly, across the pond. So, yeah, I don't think the American people will tolerate that. You look at every Thanksgiving. Hey, Thanksgiving's just a couple of weeks away. You look at the travel numbers. Yeah. People fly home at the drop of a dime. They did so even more when airline tickets were cheap, but airline tickets are expensive again because of energy wars.
I do love the thought of some of these sort of travel Instagram influencers suddenly realizing that they can't go somewhere because of, some ridiculous limit on their travel that will be a real killer to their money-making adventures. So interesting.
Yeah, but you do raise a great point. A lot of the war on energy also is a desire to control people's movements, right?
Yes.
If people are unable to have a gas car that goes around the nation untethered, if they're unable to jump on a plane because prices are too high, people are restricted. And agency, autonomy, the freedom of movement we have in America is something that we've grown accustomed to, but you realize now that it is a lot more precarious than we originally realized. And if you can make life expensive and movement expensive, you can limit people's freedoms.
Daniel Turner is the CEO of Power of the Future. He's an expert on energy and energy policy. Daniel, the president, of course, got on Air Force One, flew to Detroit, got in a 20-car motorcade, and drove to the picket line for the UAW and stood there for 12 minutes before getting back in the 20-car motorcade, back to Air Force One, and then flying all the way to California for a fundraiser. And was any member of the UAW aware of the irony that it's his policies that probably have put them on the picket line right now because of the push toward electric vehicles?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the only candidate who answered it well at the debates last week was the North Dakota Governor Burgum, because he explained this and said, look, you're talking about the strike. I think you want us to pick labor versus management, but let's explain why they're striking. All of the auto makers have realized and have admitted that if we go to an all EV fleet, we need about 40% fewer workers. So you're asking these auto workers to make a product that will eventually put them out of a job. So I would strike too. And people say, well, look at these numbers they're asking for are egregious. They want a 50% raise and a European work week. And they are egregious. Yeah. But it's also egregious to say because of government mandates, you're going to make a product that's going to fire you one day. So, hey, shoot for the moon as long as they're trying to put you out of a job.
And Daniel, real fast, we have less than a minute, but if we had a robust energy policy in this country where we were drilling for oil and we were energy independent with our own refineries making gasoline for our own consumption, obviously we would benefit the most from having internal combustion engines with gasoline-powered vehicles. Moving to electronic vehicles, which country benefits the most? Which country actually drives the energy in an EV?
China. Communist China is the one who benefits all of this.
There you go.
And again, we're getting rid of our autonomy and agency, and we're building the Chinese economy in the process.
And didn't the president's son have a lot of multi-million-dollar deals specifically with Chinese energy companies?
See, now you're just another conspiracy theorist with these crazy ideas.
I'm asking questions here, is all I'm doing.
This is threat to democracy, and let's pull the fire alarm to shut down this conversation. Quick, someone pull the alarm.
No, we're just opening the door. We're not pulling any alarms. Thank you, Daniel Turner. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you.
6:15 now, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes first on the fives. Here's Jamie Whitten in the Hadeed Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL. Making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
On the next Vince Colonnade show, things have gotten so bad, not even Coringe can defend Biden.
So you won't say that what he said was true?
I'm not going to go beyond what the president
You're declining to say that what he said was true.
I just answered.
Join us from 3 to 6 here on WMAL.
Yeah, and meanwhile, President Donald Trump was in court in New York yesterday. Kind of a surprise appearance. Apparently not everyone from the New York court system expected him to show up for this preliminary hearing. And Donald Trump afterwards spoke with reporters.
Well, I think that was very good.
That last 5 minutes was outstanding because the judge essentially conceded that the statute of limitations that we won at the Court of Appeals is in effect. Therefore, about 80% of the case is over. I was going to come out and say that, as you know, we're not entitled to a jury, which is pretty unusual in the United States of America. So I think it's very unfair that I don't have a jury. But the judge's last statement was very fair. And if I read it right, I'll let perhaps one of the lawyers speak to it. But Cliff, maybe you'll speak to it if you would. But the way I interpret that, and the way everyone else in the room seems to interpret that, is that the statute of limitations is a very real thing in this country. And that would be about 80% of this case would be over. Could somebody speak to that, please? Cliff, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So based on the judge's comments, based on the judge's comments at the end of the trial today, it would appear that he is agreeing that all the transactions that closed prior to 2014 are now out of the case.
Which is about 80% of the case. And it's also something that we won on appeal, but was not accepted by this court, but now seems to be accepted by this court.
Now, let's be clear. This is not one of the 4 personal criminal charges against Donald Trump, the man. This is a civil case brought by the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, against the Trump Organization.
Sure, yeah.
For falsification of records, et cetera, et cetera. As you just heard, the judge basically said 80% of these charges are past the statute of limitations. Letitia James, again, the Attorney General of New York, who literally ran for office saying, you put me in office, I'll get Trump.
Yeah, you want to get Trump? You want me to get Trump?
I'll get Trump.
She
You put me
released
in
these
office.
ridiculous videos.
Right.
I'm coming for him.
And she doesn't know the basics about statute of limitations,
right.
brought charges that were already not even valid. And meanwhile, this judge, though Trump is praising him, there's astounding video from the courtroom.
And mugging for the camera.
As soon as the judge sees the camera, he takes off his glasses and
sits
poses
up,
and
gives
smiles.
a big smile.
Because this is
and then he
his
sort of
big
shrugs.
moment. Yeah.
He looks in the sort of towards Letitia James, sort of shrugs like, well, and there's also a video of her glaring at Trump. She's sitting sort of one row back, and she is glaring at him like a stalker.
Yeah. By the way, why is the state attorney general showing up in court for a civil trial against an organization?
Because she's obsessed.
Because it's all politics.
Yeah.
Because it's all politics. But again, these are charges that are not even part of the criminal charges that have been brought in New York by that district attorney.
Right.
Here in D.C., twofold by Jack Smith.
No one was complaining also. There seems to be no victim here. Like no banks were complaining. Nobody was complaining. This is all made up.
No, the whole purpose is to
drive him out
Donald
of New York.
Trump into a courtroom so that there are images of him as some sort of criminal.
Yeah.
And this is the use of our court system and our criminal justice system to persecute not just a man. This really has little to do with Donald Trump. It has to do with you, the voter. How dare you support him and even gasp like this person? You are standing behind a criminal, and you're the problem in this country. And yeah, they are absolutely obsessed. You're correct. It's 6:21. So you know John Eastman, attorney for the President of the United States, whose name and reputation has been smeared by Democrats who, well, they're appalled by the fact that he dared to lend his legal advice to President Trump, most specifically in Eastman's concerns over many of the shenanigans that came out of the 2020 election that led to the Electoral College vote. Eastman's private emails were publicly released after a district court determined that it was legitimate to release said emails. They were utilized against him and many other innocent people, including Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, during the January 6th hearing. I know this personally because I was actually cited in one of the emails. Ginny Thomas wrote an email to John Eastman saying, I heard you on Larry O'Connor's show on WMAL today. And it's like, what the hell are you dragging me into this? Well, anyway, Eastman was trying to have this district court ruling overturned and appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, well, this is a moot case now, so we're not going to hear it. I don't think it's moot. I think that lawyers giving advice to any client, especially a former president or a president at the time, they should have their privacy and their legal advice protected. And I think that the court was wrong This was an appeal of a lower court decision that cast aspersions not just on Eastman, but also on his client, the former president of the United States, according to Eastman's lawyers. Anyway, Supreme Court decided we're not going to hear this. It's a moot case. It's no longer
So let me get this straight. So Eastman's basically doing lawyerly stuff.
Right.
And then they publicize, which...
That's attorney-client privilege.
Yes.
Right.
And
but
they
put it
allowed
out there,
the release
well, because Liz Cheney, had a personal
vendetta.
Javert-like jihad against
Yes.
Trump and anybody who dared to. And by the way, this also gives a chilling effect to any lawyer who wants to give advice to Donald Trump. You remember lawyers were threatened with losing their partnerships if they dared to defend Donald Trump or give legal advice to Donald Trump. Other noteworthy aspect of the Supreme Court ruling is that Clarence Thomas did recuse himself. There were calls on him to recuse himself for other things, which he did not. But in this case, he did recuse himself because he does have a personal relationship with Mr. Eastman, and certainly his wife Ginny does as well.
Yeah.
It didn't make a
difference. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because what they're, they just want to destroy these people. That's the point.
That is correct. And if we don't speak out against it whenever we can, that's exactly what they'll do. All right. Along that vein, with regard to Trump in court and this latest ruling and other things going on with our two-tiered justice system, we've got Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's sex. Sorry. It's 6:37. I've just got all these banned books on my mind. I'm getting ready for our conversation coming up. It is 6:37. And you're listening to O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 7:05, we're going to speak with litigation counsel for New Civil Liberties Alliance. And then at 8:05, Ron Charles, Washington Post book reporter. He's very concerned about books being banned. He's excited about Banned Books Week here in D.C. We were just doing some show prep on that, looking at some of the books, and that's why
you said
made
it's
that Freudian
yeah.
slip. Yeah. Joining us now, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Good morning, Mr. Fitton. Good to talk with you, sir.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Julie.
Let's start with this fraud trial in New York this week, which, again, I want to remind everybody, this is just the Attorney General, Letitia James, who promised the only reason that she ran for office is to sue Donald Trump. So here she is. At least a Democrat is coming through with a campaign promise. But 80% of the charges are beyond the statute of limitations. How much time and money is wasted on this sort of thing just to get the bad orange man?
Yeah, this is a political trial. It's a show trial. Trump is a real estate developer who's being targeted by the New York Attorney General, not because there was complaints about what he did and banks were going up and lining up to the Attorney General's office and saying, we didn't get our loans paid. Everyone was paid. No one was victimized. Obviously, other than Trump, who's been victimized by a New York Attorney General's office, who, as best as I can tell, used leaked tax return reforms interpreted by the media as a basis to target him with an unprecedented investigation that has resulted potentially in his business being destroyed. The ruling last week by the judge up there, found, quote, fraud and could result in business licenses being taken. And, that was his finding. We could have his property stolen. What a great way to freeze and interfere in an election by essentially walling off his key assets from being available to him as he goes into the campaign. What a nightmare politically and constitutionally.
Oh, the judge also, stated at the very end that the statute of limitations, like many of these charges, are outside of the statute of limitations. Why in the world was this even allowed to go so far? I guess she's just rogue. Letitia James can do whatever she wants, but she didn't even have a case in 80% of these charges or these claims.
Yeah, of course, the government's going to dispute that his words at the end would knock out the charges, as you suggested. But, they're going back to his entire business career, it looks like, as far back as before 2014, which I think is the fight over the statute of limitations. But let's take a step back, Julie. Trump would not be in court if his last name was Smith.
Right.
Or any other real estate developer in New York City. This is an unprecedented targeting of Trump, and it's kind of part of this method by Democratic Party prosecutors and politicians. And, I don't like to get too partisan here, but these are Democratic Party elected officials who are abusing the powers entrusted to them by the voters in their jurisdictions. In the case of the Justice Department, Biden's Justice Department, the entire American people, to try to jail, harass, and target someone they don't like politically. And, I'm going to take a step back further. Why is Letitia James getting any money from the federal government under this McCarthy Congress? Why is Alvin Bragg up in New York, who's also trying to jail Trump? While Willis down in Fulton County, Georgia, Jack Smith's Justice Department, they had all the money they needed last week, over the weekend, with this continuing resolution, and I don't see any serious effort to defund them.
The president's son, Hunter, will be in court today at 10 a.m. for his arraignment on these gun charges, which, they could have brought these charges over the last 5 years. They're just now doing it, and only because there was scrutiny over that plea deal that David Weiss attempted to arrange. He's pleading not guilty, Tom, which, again, it's like he's, on the face of it, there's no defense here. But this sadly, as you know, it reinforces the idea in this country that there's two tiers of justice.
No, there's one tier of justice. Protect our enemies. Protect our friends and target our enemies. That's the deep states. That's the current Justice Department's approach. And in the case of Hunter Biden, he benefited from protection obstruction by the same U.S. attorney, now special counsel, who we're now supposed to believe can fairly administer the law here. And I'm not sympathetic. To be clear, I think Hunter should have been prosecuted a long time ago for a variety of issues. But you have to wonder: can you trust the Justice Department to treat him fairly now? Are they going to throw him under the bus? Now, if this is the beginning. This is the beginning of many other charges. The Washington Post is reporting they're planning to prosecute him finally in California over tax felony charges, not misdemeanors. And they get into the whole Biden financial schemes, the racketeering, not only involving Hunter, but other members of his family, namely Joe. Maybe it's good. But if this is the way to bury all of that, and to move Hunter off the table, heck, I'd do more than plead not guilty if I was Hunter.
It's 6:43 now, and that we're all out of time, Tom Fitton. But it's always good to talk with you from Judicial Watch. Thanks for doing all the great work you do at judicialwatch.org. People need to swing over there and see all the good stuff they're doing. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
You bet. California's brand new senator is from Maryland, of course, although she's done her best to sort of scrub her social media footprint to suggest that she doesn't live in Maryland, but she's lived in Maryland for years and years and years. Governor Hairgel out there, Gavin Newsom, Governor Hairgel decided months ago that he would appoint, no matter who it is, he would appoint a black woman, period. End of discussion. He said that.
Setting that aside, keep going.
Well, try that in any other federal job.
Exactly. That's racism.
We're hiring, but only black women.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're hiring, but only white men.
Racism, sexism. Okay, can you
count
the offenses here?
So he chose this Marylander, LaFonza Butler, who lives in Maryland, hasn't lived in California for years. Think about that for a minute. The commentary, the insult to the black women who live in California.
Again, it's important to say she doesn't just live there. Her residence is in California. She rents. No, she's a homeowner. She's registered to vote in Maryland. Yeah, she lives in Maryland.
This is where she lives. She hasn't been in California in years, and so there's Governor Newsom.
Apparently, no qualified actual California black women.
Governor Hairgel standing astride his mountaintop there, gazing across the Golden State, trying to find the qualified black woman. And he can't find any. He has to go to Maryland to find her. But clearly it should have been Meghan Markle. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
She's.
But you made a good point about why he chose this Marylander.
Here's the truth behind this, and I want to give a hat tip to John Fleischman, who does some great reporting out in California, as well as John Levine at the New York Post and the Freedom Foundation, who's been pointing this out. LaFonza Butler, everyone says, Emily's List, which is a big promoter of abortion. Emily's List, this is about abortion. This is not about abortion.
Right.
This is about money. Mm-hmm. This is about campaign fundraising. LaFonza Butler, what does Emily's List do? Emily's List doles out cash
to candidates.
Yes.
To pro-choice
abortion enthusiasts.
Yes.
To candidates who love abortion.
Yep.
But ultimately, I mean, that may be the criteria, that may be why they get the money. But ultimately, Emily's List raises money and hands it out.
Yep.
What did she do before this? She was the president of the SEIU labor union. It's just like Randy Weingarten, but instead of teachers, it's for federal employees. Mm-hmm. The SEIU is a political powerhouse whose main job is to keep Democrats in power so they can keep getting sweetheart contracts from the federal government. How do they keep Democrats in power? By taking union dues and giving it to Democrats.
Yep.
The new senator from California by way of Maryland is nothing more than a money launderer.
Totally.
She raises money and hands it off to Democrats. And if you don't think Gavin Newsom is ready for the payback, if you don't think Gavin Newsom is going to be expecting buttloads of money because he's made her the senator, you're not paying attention.
John Levine on X. Big picture.
Yeah.
This woman controls a national fundraising juggernaut, which is now going to be indebted to Newsom. Read between the lines. You said it. You laid it out perfectly there. This has nothing to do with abortion. This has nothing to do with a black woman. This has nothing to do with, intersectionality. She's a lesbian, blah, blah, blah. This is a fundraising juggernaut.
Right. For Gavin Newsom, the next president of the United States. By the way, speaking of California politicians, got to hand it to Danica Roem of Prince William County. Danica Roem is more Californian than this new senator out of Maryland. Danica Roem has spent a lot of time in California, and as of now, Danica has raised $173,000 for the Senate race that Rome finds herself in. $173,000, all from California.
But she's just interested in transportation in Manassas.
That's right. It's 6:52.
Making sense of your world.
Thanks for taking my call.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Greatly appreciated.
Making sense of the news.